Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show today. I want to begin with New Zealand's somewhat underwhelming State of the Nation address, because while a lot of it just repeated talking points that we've heard before.
Remember, 2 years ago, the extent of lawlessness throughout New Zealand was a major issue for Kiwis who were incredibly frustrated at it at the last election.
There was one part of the speech that I believe should be discussed because it's true, and that is that the current global order is changing, and at a rate that is disproportionate to some of the changes we've seen since World War II.
But today our global rules-based system is rupturing. And I've spoken previously about the three big shifts that I think make for challenging times ahead for our world. First, we are seeing rules giving way to power. Second, we are witnessing a shift from economics to security. National security demands are expanding. Governments need to protect their people and their assets against economic coercion, foreign interference, cyber attacks, and terrorism. Thirdly, efficiency is giving way to resilience. Our future prosperity can no longer just be treated as an inevitable byproduct of global rules and institutions. Trading arrangements are becoming less certain and less efficient as businesses adapt to a world where tariffs and protectionism, once out of fashion, have made a raging comeback.
Now let's just look at some of the top headlines for the year we've seen already. Venezuela President Maduro getting kidnapped, and regardless if you support Maduro or not, or you agree with things he has to say or not, this is a massive change in how we go about international politics. Then we have the discussion around how Greenland should be up for sale and that ought to be taken over. We have tariffs flying left, right and centre.
The president's threat to slap tariffs on 8 allies across the continent prompted European leaders to make their own threat of more than $100 billion in retaliatory tariffs.
And as this sort of tension builds up, it does really hammer home that what Christopher Luxon's saying about New Zealand's stance is true. We've already seen Canada go ahead and make closer ties with China.
Great Hall of the People by China's number 2 in command, Premier Li Qiang, followed by an inspection of a military honor guard. And then to business. With Carney and Li looking on, all those ministers signed multiple new or renewed agreements between the two countries on a host of issues.
So when you have the world's only superpower starting to frame all its allies as the enemy, throwing tariffs everywhere, and doing so in a way that doesn't really line up with reality. A perfect example being the message that the Norwegian Prime Minister received, saying that, well, since you didn't give me the Peace Prize, I might not do peace anymore, might not do it.
The leaders who tried persuading Trump to back off was the Prime Minister of Norway, who texted the president. In response, Trump said because Norway decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize, he no longer feels obligated to think purely of peace.
And that is the kind of behaviour that really underpins this type of claim that the global order is changing. Now, it's not only USA-based things that are signs of this. We've already seen China being more bold with the Cook Islands, and the Cook Islands Prime Minister reducing ties with New Zealand. We've seen Donald Trump threatening Canada. We've seen Russia continue to ramp up its war in Ukraine. And while all of this is going on, there are some assumptions that, well, at the end of the day, there's still strong alliances there that keep the West sort of safe, keep them united. And, well, even that's sort of under attack, because the UK has now been threatened with tariffs as well, the closest ally to the United States.
Alliances endure because they're built on respect and partnership, not pressure.
And the UK have currently a reform movement forming who shares many similarities with MAGA over in the States. So of all of this going on, a massive theme that I think is important to acknowledge is globalization and how people perceive it. Because some of the strongest ways that we're seeing nations want to assert their sovereignty don't usually ride on these extremely truthful claims and instead foster these narratives that detach themselves further and further from reality. Let's just check out Stephen Miller's attitude about Denmark and some of the claims that he makes, because it really does strike this medieval sort of instinct that we see. And when Christopher Luxon comes out and says that, what, guys, things are sort of changing, I think it's great that he threw it in the speech, because check this out.
Greenland is essential for America's national security. Greenland is 25% larger than Alaska. Greenland is the size of 1/4 of the continental United States. Denmark is a tiny country with a tiny economy and a tiny military. They cannot defend Greenland. They cannot control the territory of Greenland. Under every understanding of law that has existed about territorial control for 500 years, to control a territory, you have to be able to defend a territory, improve a territory, inhabit a territory. Denmark has failed on every single one of these tests.
Stephen Miller is one of the kind of shadow presidents in the Trump admin, but what he says here is extremely clear. And lots of people may think, oh, there's probably Republicans that are against this. No, there's fuck all that are against this type of stuff. Hardly any of them really understand or care enough to stop it, because there's this general sense of American exceptionalism.
And then there's Greenland, the president with this bold idea. He is slapping tariffs on European nations right now, days before he's about to see many of them when he goes to Davos, Switzerland, for the World Economic Forum. Before he sees them, he's slapping tariffs on them until what he calls a complete acquisition, a complete and total acquisition of Greenland. Your reaction?
Comes to Greenland, I want to commend President Trump for being single-mindedly focused on America first, on U.S. economic interest and U.S. national security interest. I believe it is overwhelmingly in America's national interest to acquire Greenland. A year ago, as chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee, I chaired a hearing on the benefits to the United States of America of acquiring Greenland. Greenland has massive rare earth minerals and critical minerals. There are enormous economic benefits to America.
So with direct imperialist threats, not only from places like, one of the classics was talking about China and Taiwan, and not only from places like Russia and Ukraine, but now the US and Greenland. I think it's fair to say that while the State of the Nation was boring, what he did talk about with the international order changing is true. It's going to be interesting to see what comes up in 2026, because undoubtedly, whether you're a political person or not, things are starting to shake quite a bit when it comes to the norms. And while some perceive that as absolutely awesome, you got to realize that just because people come and shake things up, it doesn't necessarily mean that they want to make it better. They often are just doing it for a sense of personal or unhinged power. Leave your thoughts below. I'd love to hear it. That's enough for now. Cheers.